In the year AD 595, in the time of Muhammad, something wondrous and fearsome appeared. At that time, a bright comet was seen over Constantinople for a whole year. In the year AD 1007, a wondrous comet appeared. It gave off fire and flames in all directions. As it fell to earth, it was seen in Germany and Italy. In the year AD 1103, on the Friday of the first week of Lent, an unusual star appeared in the evening. It appeared in the south and in the west. It was visible for 25 days and always at the same hour. From the south, a great shaft of light moved towards it. After this, on Maundy Thursday, 2 moons were seen, one of them in the east. In the year AD 684, a comet appeared for 3 months. This was followed by such heavy rain, storms, wind and thunder as had never been heard before, and this element acted as if it wanted to destroy the city of Rome completely, and a great many livestock died in terrible ways, and people died from the lightning in the sky they saw. In the year AD 1293, a notably large comet appeared for 3 months, rising in the east and climbing to the middle of the sky, with its rays in the west. And when Pope Urban died, it disappeared again. In the year AD 1300, a fearful comet appeared in the sky. And this year, on St. Andrew's Day, the ground was shaken by an earthquake so that many buildings collapsed. At this time, the first Jubilee year was established by Pope Boniface VIII. In the year AD 1304, 3 moons and a comet appeared, seen around midnight for 3 months, in the German lands and in Italy, just as it is painted here. In the year 1438, in the time of King Albrecht, Duke of Austria, and son-in-law of Emperor Sigismund, a great darkening of the sun was seen in the daytime, and also a great comet with a tail was seen in the city of Liege. This was followed by great bloodshed. In the year AD 1347, a comet appeared in Italy for 2 months. After this, Emperor Louis IV, a Bavarian monarch, died. In the year AD 1351, in the month of December, a comet was seen in the sky around midnight. Afterwards, heavy wind sprang up, and a fiery shaft was seen to fall from the sky, which then presaged great disagreement between the Pope and the Emperor. In the year AD 1401, a large comet with a peacock tail appeared in the sky over Germany. This was followed by the most severe plague in Swabia. In the year 1456, in the month of June, a comet appeared, and within a year of that a yet bigger one, which looked really terrible, and was seen in Germany, just as it is painted here. In the year AD 962, a great and wonderful comet appeared in the sky in Italy. This was followed by a great famine, so that many people perished and were found dead in alleys. In the year 1506, a comet appeared for several nights, and turned its tail towards Spain. In this year a lot of fruit grew, and was completely destroyed by caterpillars or rats. This was followed 8 and 9 years later in this country and in Italy by an earthquake so great and violent that in Constantinople a great many buildings were knocked down and people perished. In the year 1519, on the 14th day after the death of His Serene Highness the mighty Roman Emperor Maximilian of glorious remembrance, this comet was seen over the city of Mainz for 2 whole days, so positioned in relation to the Rhine that the star pointed upstream and the cross downstream. In the year 1519, after Christ our Saviour, around the time of his birth, the comet drawn here was seen in the middle of the night near Kraftsnitz, turned towards Strasbourg. In the year 1527, on the 11th of October, at 4 o'clock in the morning, this comet was seen in Westrich for 3/4 of an hour, and then it disappeared again. It was extremely long and yellowish red, like a diluted blood in colour. At the front the head was like a bent arm, as if it had a sword in its hand, and was poised to start striking with it. and at the point of the sword there were 3 big stars, and from the stars there issued a cloud-coloured stream, which was longer than the comet's tail, just as it is painted here. In the year 1527, several streaks like long spears were seen next to the comet, with several faces and small swords in amongst them, all intermingled in a pale red colour. Between them could be seen several large flames that blazed very brightly and with a fiery light, and the faces with hair and beards the colour of grey clouds were seen here and there to be flickering through each other as if they were laying in water that was flowing in rivulets of blood, and as if everything was mixing up together, which looked so terrifying that many who saw it died. In the year 1531, on St. Bartholomew's Day, a comet was seen for some time in the sky every night in Strasbourg and in other places, just as it is painted here. In the year 1531, 4 comets appeared in the sky opposite one another, such that they could be seen in certain places in the Netherlands, just as they are painted. In the year 1531, a comet was seen in the Netherlands, which showered fiery flames like a blacksmith making sparks from iron. Quite fearsome to see, just as is painted here. Of the comet or comet's tail as it first appeared in certain of the High German districts around the 10th of August, and then for many nights, more than a lance in length, 1½ shoes wide, was seen in the sky 1531 years after the birth of Christ. In the year 1533, on the 27th of July, at 2 o'clock after midnight, a terrible comet appeared and was also seen for many days after this, which the astronomers interpreted when unrest later broke out in Germany. In the year 1542, on St. Rupert's Day, the 27th of September, a comet was seen in the sky not far from the moon for many days, just as it is painted here. In the year 1543, on the 4th day of the month of May, a terrible comet was seen in the sky over Pforzheim and in the village of Zesenhausen, with many fiery flames falling from it, and after this there followed many strange things. Some disastrous earthly events linked to comets. Comets are among the most interesting celestial objects out there. Some are visible to the naked eye, and with their predictable orbits we should always see them, provided we know where and when to look. However, ancient civilizations did not have such knowledge. Comets were mysterious objects that were often considered good or bad omens, mostly bad. Halley's comet is one of the most famous comets out there. It returns at roughly 75-year intervals, and there are historical accounts of its sightings. However, ancient civilizations did not realize they were looking at the same comet until Edmund Halley concluded that the comet spotted in 1531, 1607 and 1682 were actually the same. He predicted it would return again in 1758. The comet returned in 1758, but Halley was dead by then. The comet was named after him anyway. Halley's comet returned again in 1835, which was the same year that the famous writer Mark Twain was born. Twain died on April the 21st, 1910, when Halley's comet once again was visible. Mark Twain predicted his death and linked it to the passage of the comet. He remarked, "I came in with Halley's comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's comet. The Almighty has said, no doubt. Now here are these 2 unaccountable freaks. They come in together, they must go out together." In March 44 BC, a group of Roman senators assassinated Julius Caesar over concerns that he would declare himself king. 4 months later, a huge funeral festival called Ludi Victoriae Caesarius was held in his honour. A great comet appeared in the skies during the ceremonies and remained visible for 7 days before disappearing. Today we remember that comet as the Great Comet of 44 BC. Astronomers say it is one of the brightest comets to have ever appeared in the sky, and it was also recorded in ancient China. Another great comet soared past the Earth in 1264. Today we call it C/1264 N1, or the Great Comet of 1264. It was very bright and remained visible for 4 months, starting in July. At the time, people already had some superstitions about comets, and seeing one was considered a forewarning of impending disaster. On October the 14th, 1066, troops loyal to King Harold II of England faced the Norman army led by William the Conqueror in the Battle of Hastings. The battle was decisive. King Harold was killed, and William the Conqueror went on to take his throne and become the ruler of England. Halley's comet, which had appeared in April that year, was linked to the battle. As I have already mentioned, people of the day had not yet realised that the comet was a periodic one that came around every 3/4 of a century. That year, Halley's comet was so bright that it was 4 times the size of Venus and around 25% as bright as the moon. On October the 20th, 1811, Europeans and Americans watched in awe as a bright comet made its closest approach to the Earth. This was the Great Comet of 1811. The comet had showed up in March, even though no one was expecting to see one at that time. Some Americans became paranoid and suggested that it was an omen of some upcoming disaster. That disaster came on December the 16th, when the great earthquake shook the Midwest and southern United States. The earthquake was so intense that the Mississippi River temporarily flowed backwards. Americans soon linked the comet to the earthquake. They blamed it again when the US and England went to war the following year. The comet did favour other parts of Europe, though. Grape planters had a very good harvest, which was ascribed to the passage of the comet. They even called the wines made from the grapes harvested that year comet wine. A bright comet passed the Earth in 1680. Predictably, it's now called the Great Comet of 1680. This comet was of interest to several scientists, including Sir Isaac Newton, who used it to confirm a gravity theory he had proposed. In addition, Edmund Halley used it to determine the orbit of 24 comets. Mathematician William Whiston later studied the Great Comet of 1680 and concluded that it had made earlier flybys thousands of years beforehand. He said the comet strayed so close to the Earth during one of the flybys that water from its tail fell to the surface. Whiston added that the gravitational force of the passing comet also forced water out of the Earth's crust. Whiston concluded that the massive rainfall from the comet's tail and the huge amounts of water that reached the Earth's surface from below caused the massive floods mentioned in the Bible, the same one that Noah built an ark to escape. In AD 536, the Earth suddenly got cold. Scholars of the day wrote that the sun was small and obscured, as if there was an eclipse. The sun could not provide enough heat, causing temperatures to drop. It got so cold that the ground was covered in frost in the middle of summer. Crops failed, causing famine, mass migration, disease, and plague. This continued for a decade until the earth got warmer again. The Justinian plague of 541 to 542 was one of the most disastrous events of the period. It decimated a good chunk of the population of the Byzantine Empire. Astronomers do not know what caused the earth to cool. They suspect the sudden eruption of a massive volcano in El Salvador. The Inca Empire was the largest empire to spring up in pre-Columbian America. It had millions of people and covered a vast area until the Spanish came along and overthrew the emperor. Huayna Capac was the Incan emperor at the time the Spanish first arrived. He knew they were going to overthrow the empire based on several signs he had seen before their arrival. One was a large green comet that flew across the sky. The other was his home, which was destroyed by lightning. There was also a prophecy that the Incas would be defeated by some strangers who looked different from any other people they had ever seen. The Spaniards did not attack at the time Huayna Capac was emperor, however. They left and returned after Huayna Capac had fallen to smallpox, which was nevertheless carried there by the Spanish. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871 remains one of the greatest mysteries of the 19th century. The fire lasted from October the 8th to October the 10th, 1871, destroying one-third of the homes in Chicago, while Mrs. O'Leary and her cow were blamed for starting the fire, even though there was no evidence to prove they were guilty. Other speculations have been raised, including one that involves a comet. In 1883, Ignatius Donnelly claimed the gas from the tail of a passing comet fell to Earth and caused the sparks that started the fire. Donnelly's claims were corroborated by Mel Waskin, who blamed a comet for starting the fire in his 1985 book Mrs. O'Leary's Comet. Donnelly, Waskin and everyone else who have blamed a comet for starting the fire based their theories on claims by some people who said they saw fire fall from the skies at the time the Great Chicago Fire started. These theories may actually be plausible, considering that Chicago was not the only place that burned that October. Similar fire outbreaks occurred along Lake Michigan and in Peshtigo, Wisconsin, the same day the Chicago Fire started. The Peshtigo Fire was actually the deadliest wildfire in U.S. history, despite being overshadowed by the Chicago Fire. The Greeks and Romans believed that the appearance of comets, meteors and meteor showers were portentous. They were signs that something good or bad had happened, or were about to happen. The arrival of a comet could herald the birth of a great figure, and some people have even argued that the star in the sky, which the Persian Magi followed to Bethlehem to see the newborn Jesus, was actually a comet. In the spring of 44 BC, a comet that appeared was interpreted as a sign of the death of Julius Caesar following his murder. Caesar's adopted son Octavian, soon to be the Emperor Augustus, made much of the comet which burned in the sky during the funeral games held for Caesar. This portentous event was frequently celebrated in the ancient sources. In his epic poem, the Aeneid, Virgil describes how a star appeared in the daytime, and Augustus persuaded people to believe it was Caesar. Augustus celebrated the comet and the death of his father on coins. It did help to be the son of a god when trying to rule the Roman Empire, and many examples survive today. The Roman historian Cassius Dio referred to comet stars occurring in August 30 BC. These are mentioned as among the portents witnessed after the death of the Egyptian queen Cleopatra. Experts are not entirely sure what it means when Dio uses the plural term comet stars, but some have connected this recorded event to the annual Perseid meteor shower. Though it retains an ancient Greek name, we now know that the arrival of the Perseid meteor shower every August is actually the Earth's orbit passing through the debris from the Swift-Tuttle comet. The meteor shower is named for the Perseidi, who were the sons of the ancient Greek hero Perseus. Perseus was a legendary figure with a fine family pedigree. He was the mythical son of Zeus and Argive princess Dana. Perseus earned himself a constellation after a number of epic adventures across the Mediterranean and Near East that included the frequently illustrated murder of the Gorgon's sister Medusa. Another of Perseus's celebrated acts was to rescue the princess Andromeda. Abandoned by her parents to placate a sea monster, the princess was found by Perseus on a rock by the ocean. He married her, and they went on to have 7 sons and 2 daughters. Skywatchers believe that the constellation Perseus, located just beside Andromeda in the night sky, was the origin of shooting stars they could see every summer, and so the name Perseidi stuck. In Christian tradition, the Perseid meteor shower has long been connected to the martyrdom of St. Lawrence. Laurentius was a deacon in the early church at Rome, martyred in the year 258 AD during the persecutions of the Emperor Valerian. The martyrdom supposedly took place on August 10th, when the meteor shower was at its height, and so the shooting stars are equated to the saint's tears. Though the myths and legends may make one think that ancient civilizations had little scientific understanding of what meteors, comets and asteroids could be, this couldn't be farther from the truth. The early astronomers of the Near East, those who created the Babylonian and Egyptian calendars and astronomical data, were by far the most advanced in antiquity. And a recent study of ancient cuneiform texts has proven that the Babylonian ability to track comets, planetary movements and sky events as far back as the first millennium BC involved a much more complex geometry than had been previously believed. The APM perspective on comets now is that they are more projections, timed cycles that are there to remind us of a mechanism change, a warning that there may be destructive or other events. I remember watching Comet Hale-Bopp in the 1990s and noticing it change direction every night. At the time I assumed it was something to do with Earth's rotation. But since now discovering the globe is fake and our world is level and stationary, it is the luminaries actually moving. This tells me that comets are actually changing direction and following preset paths. A good example of that was one of the previous images from the Book of Miracles, where a comet perfectly aligned with a river and caused its flow to reverse. Again, more evidence of electromagnetics, below and above having interaction locally and not affecting every river in the lands. This is telling you that the comet's projector is actually below that river. If the luminary is directly overhead, then the projector is directly below. This would also make sense with the flow of rivers. Remember, the word current does not only relate to water.